You just saw the CCTV documentary Time is Dust, an investigation into Peru's illegal gold mining business. Correspondent Gerry Hadden and director of photography Armando Guerra are the two journalists who traveled to Peru to film the documentary. They're joining us now from Spain. Thank you for joining us. How did you find Alberto Perez, and how did you get him to trust you and to talk to you?
We found him actually through a mutual friend, a producer, cameraman at CNN, who actually introduced us about 15 years ago in Cuba. We called him when we'd stumbled on the story and we wanted to investigate it. And he knew a local producer in Peru who he put us in touch with. And essentially what we did was sent him in a week early to try to suss somebody out for us, because we knew we couldn't just go in blind. And apparently he went in with a couple of bottles of whiskey and found the owner of a pump, one of these, the owner of a hole, as they call them there, who was willing to let us in, and this miner Alberto as well, who was open to talking to us.
Yeah, I think the whole point is that Alberto wanted to talk to us, and so we really didn't have to work too hard to open him up, so to speak. And so the first days we spent with him and his family in Cusco, and we stayed at their place. So that was actually quite amazing.
Yeah, the miners themselves, they feel that the Peruvian local and national press just demonized them all the time. So this particular miner, Alberto, his gamble, you might say, or his goal was to speak to foreign journalists who might be able to tell a more nuanced story, or tell at least his side of the story as well as the other side of the story. So again, as Armando says, we didn't have to do any convincing. He was already open to the idea.
The miners operate in such a stark and barren landscape. How did you guys function in that type of environment?
That's actually a very good question. We had actually a small radio of action. We were by the pump, and there was the shack or hut that Alberto crashes in. So we couldn't actually move around too much. We had to stay and keep a low profile.
Yeah, the deal was that we could go and interview the owner of this pump, Joaquin and Alberto, in their hole, but there are hundreds of holes all around it. So we could not, under any circumstances, stray from there, because you'd have to have a deal with each individual miner, and they're not always the friendliest guys down there. So yeah, we were very restricted in terms of our movement, and we stayed after dark. We stayed by Alberto's little tarp structure where he lives, and during the day we just kept as low a profile as possible.
That brings me to my next question. Where did you guys eat and sleep? And what was the power source for your equipment? Was the heat an obstacle?
We actually carried enough batteries for 3 days. My worry back then was that, yes, we could shoot for 3 days, but on the 4th day we have no batteries. So we had to walk for, I don't know, for 15 minutes to like a canteen that had a generator. Everything there is generator powered, or powered by a generator. And so we would just walk there and leave the batteries. It was the main challenge, I think, technically speaking, is that there's a lot of humidity, and there's also a lot of heat and dust. Dust is the main problem for the cameras. So, and also we were filming, and one of the pumps broke, and I got sprayed.
One of the pumps used in the mining process, the hose, it's pumping tons of water at a very high velocity up out of the hole over the sluices. And we got down onto one of the platforms in the water, and I was standing right behind Armando, and he was on the wrong side of the hose, and it just snapped. And somehow, luckily, I don't know how you did it, but he was completely soaked, but the camera got
I covered the camera with my body, but I was just totally full of mud, and that was a good moment there.
This is a story of miners trying to get by with the state going after them. But is artisanal mining entirely illegal?
In fact, it's not at all. Since 2002, Peru has actually been trying to legalize artisanal mining, because the government recognizes that in many parts of the country, not just in the Amazon, people have subsistence styles of living. So they're either, farming or maybe raising livestock, alpaca and so forth, or they're mining for gold or other mineral resources. So the problem has been that the state hasn't put the right resources, enough resources or personnel into the process, and the process itself is also extremely onerous. You have to get 2 different types of license to mine for gold. You have to start paying taxes, which means you have to go to Lima and sign up with the tax authorities. You have to formally have employees. So essentially, you have to become like a small business. And these are, largely uneducated people. They're already way out in the Amazon. And their take on the 2002 law, which said we need to regulate all of this, was, oh, great, we're legal now. So we don't have to do anything. So that's been the kind of tension point. And where our subject, Alberto, happens to be mining, however, that's a buffer zone around a very important natural reserve. And so the government's position with regard to Alberto and all those thousands of guys that are in there is you just have to stop. There's no negotiation here.
What were the greatest challenges and the greatest dangers? What can you share that struck you that did not make it into the documentary?
Okay. A couple of things. So Peru is just an extremely beautiful country, and our trip from Cusco to the mines by car took probably, 8 hours or something? And we tried to express it as well as we could in the documentary, but I'm not sure if it comes through just how gorgeous the Sierra is, the Andes Mountains, and that descent. It feels like you're like in a time-lapse movie or something, because it's getting warmer almost by the minute as you're going down, and the landscape's changing so fast. And then suddenly you can't believe it, you're in the jungle, and it's absolutely spectacular.
One of the things that struck me the most there was the safety. We were in places that were basically off limits, and so I was really worried about, apart from the camera, our own safety. Being in the mines are a territory in which everything goes on, from fuel, trafficking, human trafficking, prostitution, drug trafficking. There's so many things going on there, apart from the gold trafficking, of course. So that was there were a lot of a lot of shady characters around us. So that was one of my concerns.
Yeah, and also this sense, I think, of resignation amongst the people that we talked to. I think it kind of comes across in the documentary, but I was really struck by just how kind of resigned everyone is to, number one, the corruption, number two, the fact that, there've never really been any jobs down there, nobody really has any hope that something's going to come along in the near future anyway. And from the government side, they're saying they're putting a lot of resources now into cracking down on the illegal mining by going in with the military and the police, but even they say, it's going to be 15, 20 years before you really start to know whether they're getting a handle on the problem.
Did you get the sense that the government is ever going to get a handle on the illegal mining?
Honestly?
I don't think so.
Not really.
Not in the short term.
No. I mean, the area is so vast, and they're going in there with big, loud, cars or helicopters or boats. So, I mean, unless you're on crutches or something, I mean, these guys just get away. They just run off into the woods. Sometimes their pumps get found, but there's enough money now circulating around in that business that even those can get replaced really quickly. So, a government force might spend 8 hours getting to one particular camp, but there are hundreds or maybe thousands of them, all over the place. So,
and also they get tipped off because the miners have, they have money, and they make good money for Peruvian standards. They make good money, so they can, bribe off the police and even the military at some point, and they get tipped off. We're gonna have a raid, and they just hide the pumps and they just wait it out. There's also the fact that where we were is the buffer zone before the National Reserve. But last week I read that there were already miners in the National Reserve. So it's getting even more critical.
Right, and that's a consequence, the miners say, of the police and military persecution, because they'll come in and these guys will just run deeper into the jungle, essentially. So you're kind of pushing or scaring the problem off in all these different directions. So the question the government needs to be asking itself is that ultimately going to provide them a solution, or should they put more resources into trying to make the regulation process and the permit process easier for these guys?
Right, or creating alternatives.
Right, right.
But that's even tougher.
So any final thoughts, and what does the future hold for Alberto Perez?
Actually, I heard from our local producer recently, and Alberto was out of the mines because he'd been a little bit sick. I mean, he's in his late 50s at this point, and he's been in there for 35 years. And as you see in the documentary, he has this little motor taxi. He bought that in part because he's getting older. So I think his future probably doesn't have too many years left in terms of mining. I don't know what your sense was from him.
Yeah, basically that's it.
Gerry, Hadden, and Armando Guerra, thank you so much for joining us from Spain. We have a special page of our website dedicated to Time is Dust. You can find it at peru.cctv-america.com.